The pressure is on for the Senate to take up a House-passed budget resolution which aims to satisfy many of President Trump's agenda items. House GOP members are pushing their Senate colleagues to pass this resolution in full, but the Senate is saying that it will take some time, months maybe, to do so. The leadership of the two chambers are supposed to be meeting to discuss a way forward. So how will the timing of this affect the president's agenda, in particular the tax cuts, which are set to expire? Here to discuss this is Congressman Warren Davidson. He serves as a member of the House Financial Services Committee. He's also a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He represents Ohio's 8th congressional district. Congressman Davidson, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
It's always an honor. Thank you, Tony.
So let's talk about the House has done the heavy lifting here. It's now up to the Senate. What are you hearing?
Well, the Senate passed a bill actually first. Lindsey Graham, as budget chairman, passed a bill that essentially anticipates a two-step process. And the House came after that and said, no, it's going to be one big, beautiful bill, just like the president asked for. And now you hear some senators trying to slow walk this. Well, maybe we can get this done before August, and taking away the sense of urgency. I think there are a lot of us that are concerned that we shouldn't be talking about anything but staying on offense. There shouldn't be any effort to slow down the president's agenda or to slow the momentum that we're building towards saving money for the taxpayers. And so the discussions are ongoing right now, and I think Senator Thune and Speaker Johnson are going to set a different tone than that slow walking verbalization that's been taking place in the Senate.
So let's talk about some of the practical implications here. You mentioned one of them, saving money, because a part of this agenda is to scale back the size and scope of government. But we also, as some of that money is shifted around, we're talking about border security, we're talking about national security, but we're also talking about this being the vehicle by which the Trump tax cuts, which he did in his first term, are extended. What's the timeline for that?
Well, look, some of the Trump tax reform has already expired. A lot of those are business provisions like the ability to deduct research and development. You want companies making their investments in America, not holding that research and development dollars outside the United States. Same with capital expenditures and interest deductibility. That's actively shaping our business climate today, and those have already expired. So we need to get that passed as soon as possible. But the individual provisions, if we don't take action this year, nearly every American who pays taxes will see a tax increase. And that's what's at stake. We're really continuation of policy on that. And then lastly, Donald Trump on tax policy made some promises like no tax on tips. And for us to do that, it takes a change in law. And so that's kind of its own standalone bill. That could probably pass as a bipartisan bill by itself. Because there are Democrats who say they support no tax on tips as well. But the things that are truly partisan ultimately need to go in the reconciliation bill. And what has become partisan that used to be bipartisan is things like not wasting money. And even the Government Accountability Office says over $100 billion in Medicaid and Medicare are going to improper payments. So why would we see people defending improper payments? Why would we let another year go by when we fail to act? We should pass something to reform this immediately.
Congressman, as you mentioned, the Senate passed a bill actually before the House, their own version of a budget resolution, but it was a two-step process. So if they move so quickly on that first bill, why would it take so long to move on the second one?
Well, the consensus on the first bill is pretty much there, so that's why it was easier. It wasn't necessarily as ambitious on the savings on the one hand, and on the other, it had spending attached to it, and that seems to be what the Senate likes is spending. And so we do need to increase funding for border security, and we need to increase funding for defense in a way that's laser focused on America's national security, whereas the previous administration was squandering all kinds of dollars on all sorts of other things. So those are part of Senator Graham's approach. They're anticipated to be part of the House approach as well, but we also set the stage to deal with tax reform. The Senate hasn't yet gotten there, and that's part of why they want to slow walk it. And the Senate doesn't have the same sense of urgency on tax reform, in part because there are no blue state senators, and we have colleagues in the Republican conference in the House that make our majority that come from states like New York and New Jersey and California, where there is a sense of urgency to deal with the high state and local tax issues they're confronting.
Now, also, as you talk about the Senate bill increasing the spending for defense and border, the House also does that, but it's offset by reductions, is it not?
Yeah, that's the commitment that the House does is, we set a higher goal for spending, and we basically put a floor at 1.5 trillion. And it's like, great if we can save more, but it also puts the burden to say, hey, if we're going to save money on tax reform for the American people, we still need revenue into the government. Let's make sure that we keep the tax reform in line with the ability to deliver savings from ongoing government spending. They shouldn't be completely decoupled. The Senate really, I think, has got a lot of momentum behind the idea that you're going to treat the tax bill the same way you treat spending, which is continuation of policy, doesn't necessarily require a Congressional Budget Office score. And that's the case for spending. But CBO wants to give the continuation of the current tax policy on income tax levels as an expense. And the reality is that would treat tax differently than spending. And I think a lot of people are for mutually assured destruction. If you want to give them a score, then you got to give both a score, or you just agree that we're not going to give either of them a score. And that really changes what's possible with this bill.
Now, this reconciliation, just by way of reminder for our viewers and listeners, that this is able to be accomplished without any Democratic support, correct?
Yeah, and look, this isn't like the only time it's been done. Democrats did this with the American Rescue Plan and with the Inflation Reduction Act. It's known as the Budget Reconciliation. And it's historically created back in the 70s, Budget Control Act of 1974, to deal with mandatory spending, things like Social Security, Medicare, the Great Society programs, the Social Safety Net programs, where we don't have a fixed amount of food stamps. If you qualify, the food stamps are available, or SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So those kinds of things are available, and you rarely do those because you don't put them into regular appropriations. But you can also blend discretionary spending, and a lot of people want to keep those separate and say, no, you got to do them separate. And that, to be fair, was the anticipated use of the Budget Control Act of 74. But it's not a theory. I mean, Democrats really did blend the two, both in American Rescue Plan and Inflation Reduction Act. And both the House and Senate bill do blend some level of discretionary and mandatory spending, like defense, like border, or in the case of Democrats, the Green New Deal was heavily funded for climate change initiatives in the regular discretionary budget. So this kind of gets down into the weeds of what the American people are talking about in terms of how Congress operates versus what they expect. And I think with the momentum, people are saying, yeah, okay, Doge and all this attention, we're less worried about Elon Musk and, the team of cyber people that they've put in place to find this stuff out than we are about the stuff we're finding out. You're like, you're wasting our money on what? Let it go to the cause and not to the things that are out there, and we can deliver some savings for people. In the meantime, the Trump administration isn't spending the money, but we want to be able to get after it and direct it towards things that we do need spending on.
Right. Congressman, we just have 2 minutes left. I want to throw you a curveball. I want to change directions here. You're also on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. A lot happening internationally right now. I mean, the world's still kind of on fire as the Trump administration trying to put out the fires from the Biden administration. What do we need to be watching right now?
Well, look, President Trump campaigned essentially no new wars. He did that in his first administration. He was pushing for peace, and he's working towards that in Ukraine. Unfortunately, it seems like the two parties, principal, Russia and Ukraine, who are at war with one another, have kind of walked away from some negotiations in Saudi Arabia. And it's interesting that they're holding these negotiations in Saudi Arabia because Iran is such a threat to the peace and stability in the Middle East. Their proxies, the Houthis, their proxies, Hamas, their proxies, Hezbollah, are really the ones driving a lot of conflict and just the 10/7 massacre in Israel. So much goes back to Israel in terms of providing peace. So it's interesting that Saudi Arabia has placed themselves as a center for not just resolving the conflict in the Middle East, but maybe helping broker a peace in Saudi Arabia.
I mean, very, very interesting as all this unfolds. Congressman Warren Davidson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. God bless you and all your viewers.
Thanks so much.